Debate, the Honourable Member by video conference, the Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a huge privilege to speak on this bill and also to be able to represent the federal NDP as a critic for small business, tourism, and economic development. Mr. Speaker, first, before I get started, I do want to give a huge shout out to someone special in my life. It's their birthday. It's my mom. And the reason it's so relevant today that I'm speaking about my mom is, thank you. I appreciate the round of applause I'm seeing in the House of Commons. Moms are really so important, as we know, in times of crisis. We see them, bringing food to our neighbor if they've been sick, or if they see an injustice in the community, they're the first ones to rise up. And, in times of desperation, when people are in difficult times in this pandemic and in crisis, we expect our government to really take that motherly approach. So it's so relevant that it's my mom's birthday today and we're talking about this important bill, because they expect the government to take that mother bear approach and make sure that everybody's taken care of. So we look after each other. And that's something that I appreciate about moms, not just my mom, but moms across this country. And we expect that of our government to take that approach. And sadly, when this crisis broke out, we saw the government step forward with an initial wage subsidy offering 10%, which clearly was not even close to adequate. We saw Ireland and the UK and Denmark offering wage subsidies between 70 and 80%. And, with our pressure, with working with, beyond normal kind of means of lobbying and advocacy, we worked together with organized labor, the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, myself and my leader, signing a letter and our party calling on the government to raise that wage subsidy. And we were glad to see them do that. And also my colleague from New Westminster, Burnaby, brought forward a proposal to bring forward a commercial rent program similar to what they were doing in Australia. So I know the government likes to say that it's difficult in the Federation of Canada to be able to, take on issues like rent, but other countries were able to do that. They were able to get beyond jurisdiction and work collaboratively to bring forward programs to help people. So today, we're really glad to see the government come back with a fix when it comes to the commercial rent assistance program, extending the wage subsidy, but there's still a lot of unknowns. First, on the wage subsidy, what does it look like, moving into the new year? And we know for tourism and hospitality businesses, certainty is so important, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank first, I want to give a huge shout out to Charlotte Bell and the Tourism Industry Association of Canada, and to Keith Henry from the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada for their advocacy in calling for the government to extend that wage subsidy. But they need certainty, Mr. Speaker, not just on the wage subsidy, but also around financing programs like the BCAP program, where only 14% of tourism businesses have actually been successful in getting financing, and 43% have been flat out denied. And we know liquidity is going to be a big issue. So these are a lot of issues that haven't been addressed. And I'm going to get into the importance of the government working with everybody, Mr. Speaker, especially during this pandemic. But my big concern is the disconnect, Mr. Speaker, the government not completely understanding the challenges small businesses are facing. We heard last night from the Deputy Prime Minister, from the Minister of Finance, about the government isn't willing to support our motion, which they flat out denied today, to backdate the commercial assistance program to April. And Mr. Speaker, it baffles me how the government understands that they had a design flawed program. They're admitting to that they made a mistake, and they're willing to fix it here today moving forward, but they won't backdate it to April 1st. And so by not doing that, there's a serious injustice going on, Mr. Speaker. And we heard the Deputy Prime Minister say that they're forward thinking. But Mr. Speaker, the debt comes forward for all of those tenants that were denied access to the landlord-driven, flawed design program that many people were basically not even able to apply because their landlord wouldn't participate. Mr. Speaker, that's 2/3 of Canadian businesses that were excluded from that program. And why it's so unfair is because many of these businesses, their neighbor got access to the program and they were denied, or they're also going to be responsible, like all Canadians, to paying back the debt that we're accumulating to help save small business in this country. So the fact that they're unable to backdate the program shows the disconnect, that they don't understand the debt that these businesses are accumulating and the challenges they're facing. And they talk about being equitable. There's nothing equitable about them not backdating their broken, flawed design program. And also the fact that they were actually threatening to go to election without providing these emergency supports. And then the delay. Here we are on the final day of 3 weeks of sitting before a break week, fast-tracking legislation to get people help. Just shows that the government really doesn't understand how serious this issue is for small business. And many of them are watching today, Mr. Speaker. Many of them are steeped in debt, or they're in arrears with their landlord. They're looking today to see if the government is actually going to backdate the program, or are they just going to go and file for bankruptcy? Because that's what they're looking at, Mr. Speaker. Many, many businesses are looking at that. And I remember being self-employed in the last recession in 2008, and that doesn't even pale in comparison to today. And I remember the injustice of the government of the day, the Harper government, bailing out the big banks, the big corporations, and leaving small business hung out to dry, Mr. Speaker. And this is unacceptable. We need the government to move much more quickly. I want to thank so many different groups, but I want to identify one. SaveSmallBusiness.ca went out and they identified really important opportunities and solutions and flaws in the program, and they advocated, for rent relief and for the government to fix this program. But they identified there was huge problems. The slow rollout was one, that it was overcomplicated in the paperwork that they were delivering, but also they let the banks off the hook. And they also identified that the government failed to bring in some help. We look at other countries, or Australia, for example, commissioned a group of business leaders quickly to come together from various sectors to provide help. They also didn't listen to real people on the ground, and they put the hammer down without they put away the hammer and brought out the scalpel. So they need to do that when they deal with these issues. And they didn't demand more from the financial industry. We saw the big banks once again, get off the hook. From contributing to doing the right thing and participating. So, Mr. Speaker, there's so many things that we saw wrong with their rollout of the commercial rent assistance program, including, assigning the contract to administer the program to MCAP, $84 million, Mr. Speaker, for a broken design program. And, here we are right now. And the biggest thing I'm seeing, and which breaks my heart, is seen, and reading last week about Goliston Bakery in Vancouver. 23 years they've been running, Mr. Speaker, and their landlord just evicted them. This is what we're going to continue to see, and this injustice is going to be carried on by the Liberals who are refusing to fix this program. I have to give a huge shout out to all the small businesses that reached out to my office, to MPs across this country, to organized labor for coming together and standing in solidarity with the Canadian Federation of Small Business, the local chambers of commerce, like I cited, Save Small Business and, Startup Canada, the various different business organizations for standing up, and Indigenous organizations and communities like Chief Dennis from the Huayet, who initially they were excluded from the wage subsidy because the wage subsidy excluded Indigenous-led organizations. So here I am rising for the 40th time since the pandemic broke out on small business, on this commercial rent assistance issue. And it's bittersweet, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to see the changes, but we need to save those businesses that are literally steeped in debt, in arrears, that need help. And I'm urging and begging the government to get on board. And I'm asking the Conservatives to also get on board and pressuring the government to force them to create an opportunity for those that were excluded to get access to the funding they so deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to raise these issues.